And that's the story of the time Jax bested Demasia's own grand duelist, Fiora.
Runekeeper. I've been coming to this port here in Bilgewater since I was a lad. I have heard you tell tale after tale, a new one to grace me every time I come to port over the years. Yet I've never seen you age as much as a day. You've told countless stories over the years, but what about yours? I want to know your story before I pass, boy.
Old man, never once has anyone ever asked me to spin a tale about myself. What is your name?
They call me Captain Greybeard, but you can call me Nicolia.
Captain Nicolia, it would be an honor to share my tale with you. To do so, allow me to take you back further than you could imagine, before the long-forgotten Rune Wars, before the creation of the ruined king and the destruction of the Blessed Isles. In what is modern-day Demacia, there lies the ruins of an ancient kingdom, long forgotten to anyone and to history itself. Raised within its castle walls was a young child, a prince named Noctua, raised in the care of a loving mother and a demanding father. The boy grew into his mother's love and shared his father's thirst for knowledge. When not in court, the boy spent his days in the royal library, a gift from his mother on his 6th name day, a world of knowledge and stories that allowed him to escape this dusty old castle and travel to the far reaches of Runeterra in his mind. The only thing the young prince loved more than his books was his mother, the kindest person in his world. She would always teach through example, passing knowledge on through her words, only after having taken action. She often reminded the boy that knowledge is a power, but only if you act upon that knowledge to better the world around you. Something she would put into practice time and time again, until about the time of the boy's 12th name day. Returning from his horse riding lessons one day, Noctua found his mother bedridden, running a fever and barely able to speak. Distraught, the boy locked himself away within the halls of his library. Day in and day out, the boy scoured tome after tome, looking for anything that would help his mother. Even after her death, the boy continued to miss court, his horse riding lessons, and more in search of answers. His father mostly preferred things this way. With no child to mess up or babysit in court, he was free to do what he needed. Until one late night, Noctua had discovered something. In a tome, a mention of a sickness related to something called the Void. This was it. He thought he was finally close to the answers he so desperately sought. But his body was tired, and his mind was murky from lack of sleep. He laid his head down on the table, knowing he could continue his research when he awoke. Unbeknownst to him as he slept, his father stepped in to check on the boy, glancing over the open books before him. A cacophony of shouting and screaming awoke in the boy, as well as an unfamiliar sting of warmth upon his cheeks, and a pair of arms underneath his shoulders. "Prince Noctua! Prince Noctua!" The voices shouted as he was dragged across the floor. The boy awoke to a great blaze before him. The library his mother had gifted him as a child, burning before his very eyes. The books, he thought as he stood to his feet and ran towards the flames erupting from the doors of the library. He fought and kicked and yelled out at the servants within the castle while they held him back from the flames, not able to bear the loss of another from within the royal family. The boy spent the next 24 hours watching the ashes of the library as they smoldered until nothing was left. His mother had taught him that coincidence was never what it seemed. So close to the answers he needed to solve what happened to her, only to have them stolen away by a fire within the stone walls of a library? This was no coincidence. The next day, the boy found himself in court once again, begging his father for new books. His father refused and pushed him into the service of the court and renewed his princely training. Lesson after lesson, followed by time in court, meetings with royals and merchants, never giving him time to investigate further. Or so his father thought. In the dead of night, the prince would scour the castle in search of what had truly happened that night in the library. It was not long before he found those answers, but it would be a lesson hard taught, one his mother never had time to teach him. Knowledge was power, but what that power could also be was a burden. On this night, the young Noctua found himself within the servant's passage next to his father's room. Through a tiny hole that peeked through the mortar, he could see his father having a conversation with someone. Someone held its gaze from within his father's mirror. Two purple glowing eyes that peered back at his father through a haze. As clear as day, he heard the voice tell his father that the boy should be dealt with, that he served the void now, and his family was of no consequence. He heard his father argue with the voice, before being silenced, and told that if he would not do it, they would, just as they had done to the boy's mother. Several days passed, and one late night into the evening, the prince called upon his father to meet him in the throne room alone. As he waited, he remembered his mother's lessons. Knowledge is only power if you act upon it to better the world. Stumbling and covered in his father's blood, Noctua wondered if his actions would really make the world a better place, as he prepared himself to slip out of the castle under the cover of darkness. His quest for knowledge only brought him to more questions. What was the void? Why had they killed his mother? And what was really going on in this world? Though it had only brought him pain, his thirst for knowledge was not yet quenched. He needed answers to these questions, so that no other child would ever have to suffer as he had, to witness as their mother withered to nothing, helpless to do a thing. Donning the garments of his grandfather, he found in a trunk in his mother's old room, and taking up the coin pouch at his father's side, Noctua left his name behind and ventured into the world of Runeterra to find his answers. He traveled for years, heading north at first to the Freljord, then to the shores of Ionia, and all across Runeterra, recording everything he would see or learn within the pages of countless journals, stashing them throughout the world when their pages were filled. His journeys leading him to the sands of Shurima, and it was here in the markets that he would find his first clue into the void. A merchant would point him across the sands, across the Zoantha Cascade, and through the Valley of the Song. One could find a fledgling city known as Ikathia. Here the merchant had heard tales of small skittering creatures with glowing purple eyes that would dig themselves up from under the sand. Surely, this was the lead the boy had been looking for. Several weeks later, he found himself on the outskirts of Ikathia, searching through the sands for answers. After talking to the locals, he had found the area in which people claimed to see the creatures, and sure enough, he would find them. Without hesitation, as the creatures crawled up from beneath the sand, they set onto the boy, chasing him through the desert until he tripped and fell to his knees, no longer able to run. Just as the creatures descended upon him, a man carrying a staff appeared and slayed the creatures. The mysterious figure smiled as he helped the boy to his feet, telling him that knowledge could be a dangerous thing. The two talked for a long time, the once prince sharing his story with the man. When he was done, the figure began to tell him of the Celestials and their knowledge. If it was answers he truly sought, he would have to take it from the Celestials, as they would not give it freely. He spoke of Mount Targon, and how it was the only place one could find a bridge into the world of the Celestials. When he was done, he warned once again that knowledge and its pursuit could be dangerous, and that the man should turn back now. Then the figure disappeared back into the desert, like a mirage that had never truly been there. The journey was grueling, and getting the Targonians to speak of the portal to the celestial world was even more so. Finally, he had found it though. Every breath felt heavy as he prepared for the long climb to the peak of Mount Targon. His answers were finally within reach. All that stood between him was the long, arduous climb to the mountain's summit. The icy wind bit at his cheeks as he continued the climb. His fingers turned red and numb as hours turned into days and days into weeks. He began to wonder if he would ever reach the top. But with each slip of his hand and moment of doubt, he pictured his mother and the glowing purple eyes staring back at him from his father's mirror, stealing his resolve. Till finally, he reached the summit, to find nothing. No doorway, no passage, simply a staff stuck in the ground. He spent hours using what little strength remained to move the snow, looking for symbols, anything he could learn from. Maybe there was a way he simply didn't see. Even if his strength wavered, he would not. Till finally, a familiar voice called out to him. So you couldn't resist stealing the Celestials' knowledge after all. Then, just like that, the numbing cold surrounding him disappeared, and the world around him was replaced with the stars. Standing before him where the staff had been was the figure from the desert. Looking up at him, the boy was brought to his feet. Fine, if you want this knowledge so much, you would steal from the gods, then you shall receive it. As he spoke the words, the figure reached out and touched him on his temple, and knowledge flooded his mind. The knowledge of the creation of the universe, of the void that stared back from the darkness, of how the Celestials had used Runeterra to breed warriors, and much more. As his eyes glowed and the knowledge filled his mind, the figure spoke once more. Knowledge is not given freely, I warned you. For your theft, I shall take something from you. Your life is no longer your own. It belongs to me, and until you complete your service to me, you will no longer age. You will no longer die. You shall travel Runeterra and record all of its stories within your book. You will find our warriors, our champions against the void for me. As your punishment, you may share this knowledge, but you shall never be allowed to act upon it yourself. For knowledge is only power if one acts upon it. Now go, Runekeeper. Weeks later, he awoke in a flash. The Runekeeper found himself inside a bed belonging to a small Targonian village. His head was splitting as a rune on his chest began to glow at the sound of Targonians speaking their native tongue. A tongue he had not known, but now he understood. Reaching down, he found a book at his side. Opening its pages, he found all the notes he had ever written during his travels adorning those pages, and a note inside the cover that said, "Your journey starts now, Runekeeper." He now travels Runeterra, recording its stories and histories within his unending pages, secretly searching for a way to free himself from his fate, but also a way to free Runeterra from the Celestials and the Void. Unable to act upon his knowledge, he shares it with all who will listen, hoping to give a little power back to those brave enough to act.